All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for, I believe this is day 3 of our career prep week. We are kicking off today's session with the topic of workplace professionalism. So a very important topic, and we will be covering that from a virtual lens as well. We know a lot of students have been going into remote opportunities. So joining us today, we have 2 representatives from ALCU. Let me go ahead, sorry. My Zoom is covering a bit of my screen. I have to move it. Give me one moment. There we go. Okay. We have 2 representatives joining us from ALCU, a company that does a lot of recruiting on campus. We have Haley Centrella, the college relationship specialist, and then we also have Jordan DiPietro. Is that correct?
Close, you're close.
Thank you. Close enough. Who is the Senior Government IT Program Manager. So they are going to be joining us today to talk all about workplace professionalism, and make sure you go ahead and find them in Handshake. They are posting job opportunities there. Recruiting for their sales internship program, their sales rep opportunity, which is a full-time job. So they have a lot of good information to share. And before I pass it off over to them, just a couple housekeeping tips. This session is going to be recorded and posted to the Career Center YouTube channel, probably around the middle of next week. So if you want to view the whole thing later or are coming in a little bit late, you will be able to find it middle of next week. Any questions throughout the presentation can be sent to the chat box. We have Leslie Wright, one of our Assistant Director of Career Counseling, is going to be managing the chat box. And then make sure you look for, I'll go back to the screen 1 to show you what other sessions we have for today. But definitely follow us on our Instagram. That's the most real-time way to keep up to date with what is going on at the Career Center and what we have offered. But for the rest of today, we do have a session going on at 1 o'clock. We have one of our employer partners, who is a radio voice, local voice in Wilmington, Sandra McClammy, who's going to be going live and talking about dining etiquette. And then at 3 p.m., we also have a diversity inclusion panel going on with the leaders of our diversity and inclusion offices on campus. So with that being said, I will go ahead and pass it off to Haley and Jordan, and you guys can introduce yourselves and then dive right into the topic.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the beautiful introduction. And it looks like you guys have a wonderful week of preps. I mean, what you just said about the dining etiquette, I would be interested in that for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you, Emily, for the introduction. Thank you, Leslie. And I see Madeline and Ashley here. Thank you guys for joining us today, and anyone who's going to be viewing this in the future. Myself and Jordan are very excited to speak with you about workplace professionalism and all things kind of virtual presence. So I will start sharing my screen here. I will also just drop a quick little link in the chat if you guys are interested at all throughout this presentation and want a way for us to be able to follow up with you. You'll just put in your name, email, and phone number into this form, and I can send you a little email in the morning with some more information and some links to apply. But in the sake of time, we will kick it off here. So let me get my presentation ready. Beautiful. Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Haley Centrella. I grew up right outside of Boston, Mass. I went to Keene State College, which is a liberal arts school up in New Hampshire, where I studied business management and communications. I actually met ALCU during my senior year at the career fair before I ventured off to work in Italy, where I did sales and tourism for 2 years, which was amazing. Upon my return back to America, I knew exactly the first company that I was going to give a call would be ALCU. And as one of ALCU's college relationship specialists here on the talent acquisition team, I attend virtual and in the future, hopefully on-campus events and host events to help build ALCU's brand on college campuses across the country. I'm responsible for planning, executing, attending events with different student organizations, academic programs, in hopes to find the next best candidates to help join the ALCU. I actually started this position remotely back in July last year, so I definitely have an interesting perspective on this topic. So I definitely wanted to bring another person, another wonderful member of the ALCU, who has definitely had a lot more experience working in person, face to face. So I will let her introduce herself, Ms. Jordan.
Thank you. First of all, nice to meet you guys. I am Jordan DePietro. I'm a government program manager at Alcu. I have been with the company for 5 years, which is honestly insane to think about because I feel like I was just in this position of trying to find my first job out of college. So I think it's great you guys are doing this because you're definitely going to be much more prepared than I was. But I actually stumbled across Alcu from a Facebook post posted from one of my friends in college. And I don't know what it was that intrigued me about it, but I just responded right away. And this kind of fell into my lap. And I'm really grateful it did. But I have been with the company for, like I said, close to 5 years. I started as a recruiter out of the Massachusetts office. And then about 4 years ago, I moved down to DC. I was continuing to do recruiting. And then about 2 years ago, I switched into a program manager role, also known as like an account manager at a lot of these staffing companies, but in the government world. And that definitely introduced me to a lot of that in-person stuff because I'm constantly meeting with people face-to-face pre-COVID to discuss, a number of different things. So I'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but just for anyone who's listening, so you can have a little bit more of an understanding. The recruiting side is who's reaching out to these candidates that we're placing on contracts or just in any type of job position. And then the position that I'm now in is working more with our clients. So a lot of the times that means I'm meeting with people who are twice my age and have way more experience than me. So it's been interesting and intimidating at times, but it's been a really great experience for me. That's just a little bit about me.
I love it. I'm excited to hear more about that experience. And when we saw this topic, I was speaking with my manager and right away we were like, Jordan, we got to get her in here. She's done a lot of movement with working face-to-face with people and having that professionalism. So excited to have her today. Thank you for introducing yourself, Jordan. Let me get on here to our next slide. So the Alcu tea, and I'm not sure if we can show hands or not, but Madeline or Ashley, have you heard of Alcu before? Maybe, maybe not. Well, if you haven't, now you will. But Alcu is a highly specialized staffing firm. We do primarily hire students that are interested in sales. However, with that being said, we truly hire based on character trait. We're typically looking for outgoing, hardworking, competitive, reward-driven individuals to come join our teams. These, of course, are attributes that will lead to a successful career in general, but definitely with sales here at Alcu. We have 4 main offices, our headquarters located in Boston, Mass. We have our government office where Jordan works out of in Herndon, Virginia, right outside of DC, Charlotte, North Carolina, and Franklin, Tennessee, right outside of Nashville. So some pretty desirable locations to live post-college, if you do ask me. And we also have 3 mini Alcus, which we call regional training centers or RTCs. And you can see that those are on UMass campus, James Madison University, and as well as UNH in New Hampshire. And this is a great opportunity for students to be able to work while they're in college and busy with different classes, but also really are looking to make some money and get ahead in their careers. So our culture here at Alcu is by far what won me over during my job hunt. Our culture at Alcu is have fun working hard. I know it can sound a bit cliche at first, but let me tell you, here at Alcu, we live and breathe by this statement. So far so that we even have gotten it trademarked. But alongside fostering a strong work ethic, we think sense of humor is important in personal development, clear expectations. If you're looking to jumpstart your professional career, make money and have fun doing it, Alcu can definitely be a place for you. Anyone have any questions so far on what Alcu does? I know Jordan explained a little bit that the recruiters are the people that are reaching out to the consultants and finding those people, building relationships with them, where a program manager like Jordan or account managers are really building a book of business and building strong relationships with hiring managers at companies. So that's how we kind of tie together. So simply put, I like to say we're kind of the matchmakers, the middlemen. And I know that the word sales can typically sound scary. Oh no, sales, I don't want to be pushing product on people. Well, that's a good thing, because here at Alku, we aren't selling a tangible product. We are providing a specialized service. So I will go on to the next slide here. Today, we're going to be covering all things virtual presence and workplace professionalism. So beginning with interviews, prepping for those, starting the job, all the way to following up and networking. We want this to be interactive, so please, I know that we have Leslie here being so kind to monitor the chat, but if you have any comments, questions, you want to throw in a story, please just unmute yourself and feel free to speak up. We love that. So virtual interview prep, the logistics. Has anyone on here done a virtual interview yet, either this semester or in the past? I see Leslie. Awesome. Well, although most interviews are virtual at the moment, we need to make sure that we are still putting in the same amount of preparation or even more than we would if we were in person. You want to treat this interview like you are going into that office. For me, that would mean waking up early, taking a shower, getting ready, getting dressed head to toe, even though we know that on Zoom, it's our top halves, but it makes me feel better, getting fully dressed, even putting on some shoes, getting in my car and going for a ride to get some coffee. Makes me feel like, I'm getting up, I'm getting going. It's a great start to my day. So I definitely recommend that for you guys. You want to make sure that when you're prepping for your interview, that you have a designated place set up, someplace that has limited distractions, good lighting, somewhere where, there's not a bathroom behind you or your friends walking back and forth. We know as employers that, hey, you might be in a dorm room. That's totally fine. I just like to say, bring the elephant to the forefront. Say, hey, I apologize if you do see anyone walking behind me. It's because I couldn't find, a quiet location and I had to take this call in my dorm room. Also, you want to make sure that you have things like a notebook, pen, and your resume on deck and ready to go. This is super important. Something I also like to mention, feel free to tell whoever you're interviewing with, hey, I'm going to be taking some notes. So if you see me looking at another screen or down, I'm not distracted. I just want to take some notes on this. And the biggest tip that I have for you guys, and tips of, preparing besides double checking your Wi-Fi, your Zoom, your laptop beforehand, is doing your research and having questions prepared. There is no worse way to go into an interview than not having at least one question prepared. Typically, I even recommend having 9 questions, 3 about the company, 3 about the position, and 3 about the person you're interviewing with. Because people love to talk about themselves too, especially if they're passionate about it. So don't be afraid to ask questions at the end. I think sometimes we get nervous and, maybe we don't prepare them ahead of time. So creating maybe 9 of them, you're never going to exhaust them. You will have them, especially if you're interviewing at some place like Alku, where you're meeting with maybe 3 different people. You have a question from each topic to ask them. So making sure you're prepared and doing your research beforehand is going to set you up for success on this interview, help you be less nervous, and really, hopefully make you exceed and succeed in that interview. So we are going to talk a little bit about during the interview, and I'll pass over to Jordan to give you guys some great tips for during the interview.
Sure. And Haley, I just had to add a note because we always love to tell our students this. The Career Center does have 3 interview rooms that you can reserve.
Okay.
So if you're ever looking for a quiet place and you're struggling where to find one, you can always call us, make a reservation. Just had to throw that in there.
That is awesome. That is such a great resource. Definitely take advantage of that, you guys.
Well, I'm going to talk about during the interview. And a lot of the times with interviews now, it's going to be over Zoom. And I find that that's probably so much more challenging to actually connect with the person who's doing the interviewing. So I think taking note of some of these things will really be helpful. They are from Alku's point of view, but they're really transferable to any position that you're going to be interviewing for. So the first one would be being on time, even early. I personally believe that you're prepared. That also means you're going to be early for anything that you're doing. So show up a few minutes early, show them that you're excited. That's the first way to get started on a good foot. For the second one, sit close to the camera. Now this is really awkward. We're not saying to like get all up in the camera's face. Not what we mean by any means. But having good posture and sitting, a good distance away, I think that seems like you're more engaged. When you're slouching or leaning in your chair, you're not getting that personal connection that's already really challenging to do over Zoom. So that kind of leads into the second one or the third one, which is maintaining good posture. So again, that leaning in the chair, it just looks like you're not as interested. And standing up straight, that's a way to just show that you're confident. And that is what you are trying to do on these interviews, is really find a way to have a presence in a way that's already a little bit debilitating. It's over Zoom. You're not in person. So try to do that the best you can. Taking notes, like Haley had said, asking questions. These are all different ways to show you're engaged. And at the end of the day, no one's going to want to hire someone who's not actually interested in their position. So you, again, have to go out of your way to show how interested you are. So visibly taking notes, and then referring to those notes when you're asking questions. So you're noting these things down. And what you want to ask about later versus just, maybe interrupting somebody when they're talking. Write those things down, ask them at a point when they give you the time to ask questions. Looking at the interviewer, this is something that I think everyone struggles to do on Zoom, because it is so tempting to just look at yourself and see what you look like, but you really do want to be, again, creating that engagement in a way where it's not always the easiest. So look at them, try to make eye contact. It will come across as much more professional than just looking at yourself the entire time, even if you don't know that at the time. Especially, especially when they are doing these interviews all the time. So they can tell when you're looking at them or when you're looking at yourself. People start adjusting to that sort of thing and taking note of that. Avoiding filler words. So and like, that is really challenging across the board. But again, I think that comes into, are you truly prepared? And do you have, your mental notes ready about what you want to talk about? And like words like that, they come up more when you don't know what you're going to be saying. So being prepared and having your talking points ready, that will help with that. A filler word here and there is not going to make or break an interview. I was one who thought that it would, and I overthought that to death, to a point where I almost didn't seem natural. I think we can all like agree with that. If you're not sounding natural, they're not getting to know you. So it's okay to slip up from time to time. But a easy trick is just know what you're going to want to say about yourself. Have some situational questions ready with answers about your life so far. It's about you at the end of the day. A lot of the questions are all going to be about you. You should be able to come up with those points beforehand. And then the last one is mannerisms. I don't know if you can see, I talk with my hands a lot.
I've been watching. I love it.
That is me. I do
pulls
that.
You in.
I think that's a way of seeming engaged, and it just feels natural to me. So my natural mannerisms are talking my hands and trying to sit up straight. Whatever they may be for you, just take note of what you are doing. I always think it's really helpful I look in the mirror beforehand and like kind of go over some things that I'm going to say. And I think you kind of note some mannerisms that are maybe not so great. Like I used to have one where I just touched my hair 24/7 and it was so bad. And I noticed it when I would be like talking in the mirror, going over what I want to say. And I'm like playing with my hair the whole time. That is a mannerism I lost. The talking with my hands, not so much. So I would try to practice those things. I know it's not always easy and it's probably awkward at first, but it will go so far with actually seeming like a natural in these interviews. So those would be what I would suggest. I don't know if you have anything extra, Haley, but.
That was wonderful. I see Leslie unmuted herself here.
Yes. Hey there, guys. So I just want to interject. The Career Center also has a resource for students to practice interviewing. And so some of the things that you mentioned on this list, especially the filler words, mannerisms, how to look at the interviewer, et cetera, they can actually practice with our service, our resource called Big Interview. And it's a great way where students can, there's a whole library of interview questions within that platform. Oh, wow. And it integrates with the user's webcam. And so that way they can actually record themselves answering questions. So for example, I always have my students do the tell me about yourself practice.
Oh yeah.
And so they
That's a
can
big
actually answer it. Yep. And so that's a really great way to practice. So for our students who are like, wow, I've never done a professional interview like I probably would do with ALCU, and I'm really scared and I don't know how that's going to be and what to expect. And that's a really great way to kind of build confidence. And clearly we'll never know. I mean, you
Absolutely.
can't know exactly what's going to happen. But
Absolutely. But
it's,
the more practice, you
yeah,
know, the
practice makes
better.
perfect. Yep.
Exactly.
That sounds a
Exactly.
lot more helpful than talking in the mirror. So I would suggest.
Yes, yes. And our alumni have access to that too. So I just want to make sure folks out there knew. Thanks.
Awesome. I'm glad. Yeah, guys, make sure you're taking use of these resources. I mean, you know, how many people could sometimes wish that they only had a resource like this? So definitely take advantage of that. You know, go through, practice these things, practice on your own. Even if you don't have an interview scheduled, start mock interviewing, you know, start taking advantage of those things, because the more practice that you have, even just with interviewing, the more, you know, networking skills that you're going to develop, and speaking skills, public speaking. And once you find that confidence in yourself, you're a rocket into space. So definitely that was awesome. I loved what Jordan said too about like looking at the interviewer, not yourself. And something cool that ALCU just sent out to us last week in a business tech memo was you have the option now to click on Zoom and hit hide self view. So if you are someone who struggles a lot with staring at yourself via Zoom, and maybe you're nervous about it for an interview, click that hide self view. Awesome. After the interview. So this is extremely important. This is something that could really, you know, help boost you up and make you stand out against the other candidates. This could be a make or break. There are 3 major things that you want to do following your completed interview. First being send each interviewer a personal, separate thank you note. And this is where Jordan mentioned, take notes, you know, write down the different things that they're saying. That way, when you're going in to send your thank you note, Jordan, it was so great hearing about how you've become more aware of your mannerisms. Anything, just a specific story or comment that they mention, you send that over maybe an hour after meeting with them. They're like, wow, okay, you know, they might have jumped into another interview already, but they see that and they say, okay, Haley reached out. She even mentioned a specific story, so I know it stuck with her. That's going to stick in our heads as recruiters. So making sure that you're adding in a little personal flair there, whether that be, I loved hearing about your experience on this side, and you know, you're such an inspiration. Anything along those lines, making sure that you're sending, you know, a personal and separate thank you note. Something else I like to mention too, change up the wording a little. Not that all recruiters are worried too much about you sending us the same exact, you know, thank you email, but making it a little bit more personal can really go a long way, especially if they're on the same team or something of that nature. After sending a thank you note, request them on LinkedIn. I know sometimes we're nervous, maybe we don't feel our LinkedIn is where we want it to be. I tell students all the time, do not let that hinder you making a connection. If you feel like your LinkedIn is not where you want it to be, you can continue to develop that. We know that your pages are constantly developing, but don't miss out on making a connection. Maybe because you're nervous, you don't have too much activity. Don't worry about that. Still make the connection there. And always send a little note via LinkedIn as well. Like, hey, you know, we were able to meet last week. Thank you so much. And making sure that you're being timely. So not last week, saying earlier or yesterday. Follow up on any requests, such as onboarding documents. Say they want you to call the internal recruiter that you're working with to tell them how the interview went. Making sure that you're doing this with urgency. This shows that you are interested. And again, I know Jordan mentioned this, but people want to hire people that are excited about the position. So make sure you're showing your interest. Our conversation left me feeling so excited. If given the opportunity, it would be an honor to work with you in the future. That's just one example of something that you can say to someone that you were interviewed with. And then say, you know, I'm looking forward to hearing back. You don't want to be too pushy, but I think it's great to make sure, you know, you are following these specific things. So expressing interest, asking about next steps, that is a huge one. That shows, you're eager to start and get going. Any questions or comments on after the interview? No?
Haley, I have one that I just think it comes up in the Career Center a lot when students are coming in asking for advice,
Yeah.
how soon to follow up.
Okay.
And that can really vary from, industry or who you've met with, but, I think some general advice there is, even before you've left the interview, maybe you have a wrap up conversation with somebody, maybe it's your last interview of the day. You've been talking with a specific recruiter. It is absolutely okay to ask them, like, what's the timeline from here? When will I hear back from you? And then that will give you a nice gauge of how soon to follow up. Obviously, that's
Absolutely.
excluding the thank you emails. The thank you emails, you want to make sure you get those out right away. But as far as a timeline for following up and a decision being made, you want to make sure you're not being too pushy in that regard and sending that
Exactly.
sooner than what the timeline was outlined. So I just wanted to add that in.
Exactly. And I know I've even personally spoken with students that struggle with this, and we're going to go into that on our next slide, but not knowing if they're being annoying to a recruiter. And I think that this is a common thing that we all think of. But we have to take a step back and realize that this is what we are supposed to be doing, is reaching out, showing interest. And as an internal recruiter, our jobs are to answer those questions, to follow up and answer any concerns that you have, or excitement even. So don't be afraid, too much of bothering or annoying someone. Of course, you don't want to send 17 consecutive emails within, an hour, but being urgent and, not being pushy and finding that good way. And Emily, I loved what you said, asking, okay, when should I follow up? Should I wait an hour? Be transparent. I think that's, a huge thing, and it can get you very far with the process. Love it. So now we're going to transfer into that kind of awkward period where you accept the position, but you haven't started yet. So I know some of us may be in this boat, and I just wanted to share a quick story about my end. So I actually interviewed with Alku in person. It was a year and 2 weeks ago. So right before everything shut down for COVID. I was in person. I got to do my victory lap, meet everyone. It was amazing. And I was supposed to be starting March 20th or something on those dates. And of course, that's when everything was shut down. So I was unable to start right away, given that my position was mainly going to be traveling. So they had to figure it all out, right? So they called me and they were very transparent. Hey, with everything going on, we don't know right now the exact date, but we will keep you in the loop. They made sure to keep me in the loop. But of course, I was a little nervous, it's natural. And you're like, well, we don't know what's going on. Am I ever going to be able to start? And that timeliness in between there can be scary. So making sure that you're just staying in touch, but not overstressing yourself. They're going to follow up with you. Say you have a start date and it's in May. Don't be too nervous about being in touch with everyone on your teams or things of that nature. They're still working full time. So once you start, they're going to welcome you with open arms. But I'll transfer it over to Jordan to just talk about some, tips here on starting the job and really that gray area between when you start.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be a little bit of a gray area, but for the most part, I think you always have someone who you're in contact with. I personally would love to be followed up with a lot about, what are my next steps? What do you need from me in the meantime? Understanding that they can't give you an answer right away, but there may be something that you can do to prepare for the job in the meantime. So asking them, like, what would you suggest I work on? Like, I'm excited to start. I'm eager. I know this is already going to maybe slow down some of my development and picking things up quickly because I'm starting later. And
Good point.
yeah, so like asking, what would you suggest? Like, what will help me get prepared for when we finally do have a start date? You're still seeing me engaged, but you're understanding that COVID threw everyone for a little bit of a loop. That was nationwide, worldwide. So you have to be understanding of those things. But checking in, asking what you can be doing in the interim, and really just having a good attitude about it. I think that is huge. Letting them know that you're understanding. One, you have to realize that when you're working with an internal recruiter, it's their job to be delivering this news that they know is not going to go over super well. So being kind and understanding and letting them know, like, hey, I'm really sorry you had to make this call. I know this is definitely a difficult one, but just let me know what you need from me in the meantime. And if there's anything that I can be doing to help myself get prepared before I start, I would really love to start doing that now. Like, it's a human being you're talking to. So always keeping a good attitude and, you know, understanding that this is not a message that's coming from them probably, but their higher ups. I think that goes a really far way.
Absolutely. I love that point, Jordan. That was great. And, you know, being committed, just showing that you are 110% on deck, ready to go whenever they call and they're ready for you. I think this is super important. Don't be shopping around for other positions if you've already accepted an offer. It's not the etiquette of the professional world. So making sure that when you are committed and you sign your offer letter, you're 110% on deck. I think that's a big point too. And whether that be you showing that through posting it via LinkedIn or on your personal Facebook to tell your friends and family, it's a great way for your employer to see it. When I see a student that we've gotten hired post, I'll be starting with ALCU this summer, I'm so excited. I'm like, oh my God, yes, this guy is gonna rock it when he starts this summer. And I'll make sure that on his first day, I reach out and say, hey, good luck. If you need anything, I started remotely as well, so reach out to me. But these are just some ways that you can, you know, get ahead in that time before you're starting. But I think what Jordan said was key. Asking them, hey, are there any resources? Is there anything specific that, you know, maybe I should look into and educate myself on in the meantime? That shows passion, that shows dedication, and that shows hard work ethic, which is what we want to see, especially here at ALCU. Great.
And Haley, I just had to jump in because I thought it was such a good point. And I won't go too far into it, but I just think it's important for students to know how much that being committed and handling an offer, or, you know, the declining of an interview or declining of an offer the right way. Because I think what you quickly realize when you enter the professional world is how small it can really be.
Yes.
And how, you know, people end up knowing each other or working at other companies. And this is, you know, in the same state, across state, offices, you know, are friends with other competitors in other industries. So the world is very small. So that's a very important tip we always like to tell students is it's very important to handle stuff like that the correct way. And it will do a lot to show your professionalism in the right way. So
absolutely, because say we have a student that has accepted an offer, we are getting their computers ready, their schedules, their training and development created. And if we hear maybe they're interviewing at our competitor down the street, that's not a good look. So once you have committed to that offer, you are committed, you're 110% there. I think that's important, Emily. Thanks for adding that.
I think even past like professionalism, it just shows maturity. You know, there are so many companies that already write off college, like recent college grads, because they're afraid they may not be professional enough or mature enough. And like, you should have it in your mind that you're proving these people wrong, because you're going to come in and you're going to be the most mature professional person there. And getting started on the right foot like that's a huge thing to take note of.
That's a level up for sure.
Yes.
I love it.
Ladies, I got a quick question for you. So, you know, when we're talking a little bit about kind of the do's and don'ts of kind of, you know, accepting a job offer and kind of being professional like that. So if I'm, you know, a graduating senior and, you know, it's September, let's say, right? And it's my senior year, and you guys do a job fair or a campus interview or whatever it is. And, you know, I'm super interested, and it's September and I'm graduating in May, right?
Yep.
And my friends, I'm because I see social media, I see what the Career
They're
Center is
starting
doing
to
with
get
other,
jealous.
right. And well, and I think that they start to realize that, wow, you know, I love ALCU, and there's also so many other options for me too that I don't want to. It's that FOMO, like, you know what I mean? I don't want to miss out on a different opportunity, or like I'm still kind of shopping a little bit, and you know. So that's a normal part of college activity, is that curiosity and So
I think I was in the same boat too.
yeah. So do you have any insight into that? And also what can you
Yeah.
speak to what Alcu does once I've signed? If I do sign with you in September, well, I've got all the way until May.
Yep,
How are you retaining me?
absolutely.
That's a
So
question that I have.
yeah, for sure. So for two parts, I'll start with how are we retaining? So we can hire anyone, it could be a start date in June for right now, let's say. But we have an intern program. So if we do meet a senior student who is accepting a full-time offer for, say, in September, um, we'll give them an option. Hey, would you like to try out the internship? So that you have an opportunity to, test it out and to go through this while you are waiting for your full-time role. So that's something that we do. Another fun piece that we've done since working remotely and something that I was involved in was virtual happy hours. So even if you're not starting, scheduling a time, hey, we can look forward to April 7th, where we're going to meet as a team. We know that you're not starting till May, but we'll have a little happy hour and get to know each other a little bit. That's something Alcu does as well. But really, I think the best part is that you have a point of contact. So our internal recruiters here, they are here for you. And they're here to answer any questions, any concerns that you have. So not being afraid to reach out to them and building a good relationship. I think something Jordan said that was very important was we're human beings. And sometimes we forget that, especially when we're in this huge virtual environment. So making sure, when your recruiter's calling you, checking in with them, asking them how they're doing, forming a personal relationship with them, because the more that you do that, the more confident, the more personal you are speaking with them on the phone. And another way, I think it was part of your first question, Leslie, was shopping around because they're unsure. They're missing out on the FOMO. I think that's where preparation for questions in an interview is going to help them. Because if you are asking questions like myself, something I asked Alcu in an interview is, hey, growing up, volunteering has been something that is super important to me. It's part of my values. What does Alcu do that aligns with that? And they told me about their awesome volunteer time off program. Alcu gives back. And that's when I was like, there's no way I could even be on the line about this company, because I was asking, things that were very important to me, to my values, making sure that the company aligns with your values. And asking questions during your interview is when you're gonna, be sure, like, okay, this is the place for me. Anything to add on there?
Yeah, I wanted to add just off of saying the first question about the FOMO piece. I think it's completely fair to be upfront about your timeline and when they're comfortable making a decision, because then our internal recruiters are fantastic at being like, okay, then let's put a pause on this. Like, I don't want to rush you, but I also know how quickly we move, because we do, and we're hiring at all points. So we can make a quick decision on you, but it never gets things started correctly if we're able to make a decision on that person, but they're unable to make a decision on us. And it goes back to what I had said earlier about, we want people who are excited to work with us, and every company does. You don't want to hire someone who's on the fence. So in order to kind of prevent that coming up in conversation, just know what your timeline is to make a decision and ask the company when they would suggest you start interviewing, based on knowing your timeline may be April or May, and that's completely fair. But kind of setting those expectations up front, I think really helps, because that person that you're on the phone with is going to be able to tell you when it would make sense in their process to start applying. Some companies, separate from Alcu, Haley, I know you can speak to this, they take like 4 months to make a decision.
Yeah.
You may need to still start in, September or whatever time frame that might be. Other companies, it could be really, really quick and just like a 1-2 step process, and they can decide within a few weeks. So then you have more time to keep them on your list, but go through those longer processes and see, where everyone ranks. So
for sure.
Interesting.
I love that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Yeah, no, of course. So I know this slide is definitely stuff that we've kind of covered already, so I'll definitely fly through this. But regardless if you are in a virtual setting or not for your big first day, doing these things is very important. So Likely when you're starting, like when I started at Alcu, I already had a schedule created for me. So I came onto my Outlook and I studied that thing. I even wrote it down, which is a little bizarre because I had it right there on my computer. But it was my first day. So I wrote down my schedule for the week. So pay attention to your calendar, making sure that you are early for meetings, that you're testing out all of your different softwares, hardwares, and getting familiar with what you're using. I know this seems like the smallest little thing, but myself, I was an Apple user for 15 years. Like I hadn't used a Microsoft computer since computer lab in second grade. And that was something that I had to get adjusted for before my first day because I couldn't, it was an adjustment for the keypads. This is something small, but that's something to prepare. You know, I spent a week before my start date using this computer, getting familiar with it, making it my own so that the day of I was comfortable. I knew where I was going, even in a remote setting. Creating to-do lists. I can't tell you guys enough how important this is to me. I still handwrite my to-do list so that I can cross them off and color coded. But doing this the night beforehand or the morning of is super important. So if you have any last minute things you need to do, even if it's as simple as waking up, getting coffee and getting dressed, but setting yourself up for the day is so important. I said this before, dress for the day. Even if you're putting, you know, you're not showing your bottoms, get dressed up. It makes you feel better about yourself. It makes you feel more confident and excited. And definitely limit distractions. You do not want, you know, your cousin, your boyfriend or girlfriend coming in the background of your workday. And if that's, you know, if you are virtual, just making sure that you are limiting distractions, whether that be by putting a virtual background like we have here, or trying to relocate into a different room, wherever that may be, or even if you have to do your first day of work at one of the interview rooms at the Career Center, you know, take advantage of those opportunities, make sure that you're in a place that makes you feel good. I think that's important too. Every single night before I go to bed, I clean my office space. Even though it's in my bedroom, I still organize my office space. I, you know, clean my little areas because when I wake up in the morning, I'm ready to go. And, you know, it gives me a good sense of organization. Going into virtual networking. So you've started the job. Now what? So this is definitely something I faced. I accepted the job and I started July 13th. I was frankly terrified because I have a very big personality and I love to meet people in person. So I was nervous, you know, how are people going to perceive me at the company? How are they going to know who I am? And these are all things that you can do through networking. So one example we wanted to put up here is during that gray space between your time, you know, we said making sure that you're reaching out, connecting with people on LinkedIn. Be active on LinkedIn, you know, start cleaning up your online presence. I think something that is important, and we might overlook this, but as a recruiter and as an employer, we are Googling people. If you're starting on our team, it's out of pure curiosity. You know, we're not looking for anything bad, but we're curious. We're curious people, and, you know, we're looking you up. So making sure that your online presence is cleaned up. And that you're starting to build a personal brand that draws people to you, which I know Jordan's going to talk a little bit about in our next slide. Keep it short, but make it personal. I use the phrase kiss versus kill. So you can keep it short and sweet or keep it long and lengthy. You always want to kiss, you don't want to kill. So making sure you're keeping it short, personal, visibility and consistency are key. Even if you need to set a reminder once a week, LinkedIn love, get on LinkedIn, share an article, support one of your friends that maybe is promoting, you know, their new job. Get on there, get supportive, because when I see someone's LinkedIn that's joining my team and I see that they're congratulating their friends on, you know, accepting offers, that gets me excited. You know, I see that support. I see that they're on there, they do care, and they're building their brand. So I'm going to transfer over to Jordan to talk about personal and professional brand and really how hers has led her to be so successful.
Yes. So this was a fun conversation between me and Haley
Yes.
talking about this. So I'll go through some of the slide and then I'll kind of go into my own opinion on it. But obviously, when we're talking about personal brand, we're talking about, your social media presence. And then, of course, the next layer of that would be your group of friends and just how you normally communicate when you're just talking to a group of your friends. That's who you are as a person. That's who you are when you're comfortable. Professional brand, I feel like it can be more intimidating because that's really the unknown for you guys right now. But that's something that you'll work to craft. And the sooner you do that, the better prepared you'll be to have a more, stronger understanding of what you want it to be and how you want, your coworkers to describe you as opposed to just your friend. So obviously when you're speaking like about professional brand, that's going to be more like just how others see you in the workplace. Of course, it's a little bit different because you're not sitting in an office setting with these people, but how you present yourself on Zoom meetings and things like that, or over email. I think it's as simple as that. So why I thought this was a fun topic was because I really didn't see a difference. Of course, if I'm talking to a friend, it's going to sound different than when I'm talking to one of the, our clients. But at the end of the day, it's not that different. I try to always be as mature and professional as I can because I think that goes so far in just helping me professionally, which at some point, which is coming very soon for you guys, that's going to be your life. That's most of your life is how you are in your workplace setting. That's 8 hours a day, at the minimum. So it kind of is hard to describe, but I would say I don't really think I have a totally separate personality when it comes to personal or professionalism. It's just who I am and who I've become. And that was not like on day one of my job, I started that way, but I knew that I wanted to be the best I could be at my job. And once I accepted that and said, okay, college time might be over, this is my new world. And I just kind of found like some ownership in that. And I enjoyed it. But I think ways to develop that were fun. I like this like little blurb on the slide down here, Haley, where it's what qualities make me stand out from my peers? What have I been known for in the past? How can I add value to my peers and or team? What is my greatest strength and trait? So I was thinking about this and I was like, how did I actually come up with like how I wanted to be in my workplace? And for me, I've always been, my friends would describe it as blunt, but I guess now professionally speaking, it would be described as direct. So not blunt.
Love that.
And I really do still feel like that's why it's kind of just meshed together for me. I found a way to be good at my job by being as direct as possible. In of course a professional way. But that was me before and that's still me now. When I go and I sit down in a room, and a lot of the time for my job when it was in person, which is slowly getting back to that, which is great. But I'm sitting in a room and I'm now 27 years old, but I'm sitting across from usually 3 men who are like late 50s. And I have to somehow find this like confidence to be, how do you do that? And I have to find this confidence to speak to them and speak to things that a lot of the time I don't know a lot about, because in the government space, we're talking about cleared things that I don't have privilege to, which is even more challenging. But you find that confidence. And I think I did that from I've always been a blunt person. I found a way that's how I'm going to run my desk, is I'm going to be direct and I'm going to be honest about my opinion on things, and people either respond well to that or they won't. But the right amount of people will, and those are the people that I'll be able to form those like really strong professional relationships with. So that's how I did that. Haley, I don't know if you have anything like from I know you're talking to a different crowd than I am for sure.
Yeah, so I think that was really fun when Jordan and I were really discussing this slide, was that, she was really seeing that her personal brand and her professional brand were so intertwined that there is no big difference there, which I think is important. And guys, when we say personal brand, that could be something as simple as I'm the friend that always says explanation points in my text messages. It can be that simple, but those little things start to stick. So maybe you're the person that doesn't respond on time. You don't want that to be your brand. being aware of these things is important. So even asking your friends, these questions, be like, hey, I'm working professionally to try to develop myself more. What qualities do you think make me stand out? Your friends know you well, even if it is in a personal, relationship, they still do know you well. So maybe you ask them for some advice too. But something that was funny that Jordan and I were talking about was down here, you'll see pro tip, determine who you're marketing your brand to. Now, this is when we looked at each other and realized that we are marketing our brands, which are completely different, to totally different audiences. So myself, I would typically say that I'm like a ball of energy. I'm very enthusiastic, and I'm, very supportive and excited all the time. But my target audience is working with, college students and trying to talk to people that are looking for jobs and exploring different options, but are still developing themselves. Where Jordan, could be talking to some very high level security clearance government contractors or clients, which is completely different. So that's where we saw that, our brands are adjusted for who we are marketing it to. And we thought that was, very interesting to see, like having different professional brands, but you want to tailor it to who your audience is. So I think that's very important. Knowing that, hey, you could be going to an interview with someone like Alku and you could meet the funnest people of your life, laugh the whole time and have a really great experience. But, you might get an interview that's definitely a little bit more serious. When you get on there, making sure that you're adjusting how you market yourself is very important. If the person that you're speaking with maybe doesn't have a very high energy level, maybe you don't want to go in there super, super energied up. So just trying to find a way to tailor your brand to who you're speaking to. If you're meeting someone maybe like me who has a high energy level, try to match that. Try to match my energy. And that is just an example of ways that you can get ahead and really be, aware of who you're speaking to and how you're marketing your specific brand. I know I saw some smiles when we were talking about this. So Leslie or Emily, do you guys have any, examples of even what your personal or professional brand might be? Another one of mine is I'm a cheerleader. I always have been, I always will be. So you'll see me in our internal communications, just constantly cheering people on. But that's part of my brand.
Yeah. So yeah, I think this is a really important message. One of the things, the hats that I wear with the Career Center is doing a little bit of marketing, and another area that I've also been involved in at UNCW is working with a lot of business faculty, and that was part of my history here. And so yeah, I learned honestly the hard way, though, how to kind of match that energy, like you said. We do a lot of work in the Career Center with the Myers-Briggs type indicator. And so
Okay,
I
yes.
learned, like, for example, accounting faculty, right?
Yeah.
There, or the folks that are in the finance and accounting and econ area. These are very, we call them quants, they're really
Yeah.
hardcore quants. And I'm exactly the opposite, right? Even if you look at our Myers-Briggs, we're completely the opposite, right?
Yeah.
And so, and plus my energy and my client of choice from the very beginning was students. And students aren't, well, I can't generalize, but most students are going to want to have somebody who is a little bit dialed up, because and has that enthusiasm, right? However, when you go to, a department meeting or have a meeting with an accounting, department head or whatever, you have to remember these are not students. These are, folks that are they're not going to be able to not relate, but they're not going to be able to, it's the enthusiasm isn't going to land on them the same way it lands on students.
Exactly.
So I have to dial myself back and remember who my audience is. And so that was a really hard learning experience for me, because in a way, what we're kind of asking people to do is change a little bit of the way that they deliver themselves to others, right? And that sounds kind of inauthentic.
Yep. And I think
it's
that's
sort of something you have to wrestle with.
I think that's a good point too. And I think that's why when speaking about this, I use the word tailor rather than change. Because again, you guys, if you are interviewing at companies, please never change who you are for a company. If you're having to change who you are and who your beliefs and values are, maybe it's not the right fit. Just keep that in mind. So don't ever feel like you have to completely change, your values, but adjust them, tailor it to who you're speaking to, tailor it to the energy level, tailor it to whether it be an accounting professor or a communications professor. Keep these things in mind. And I think even the first step is maybe not tailoring it, but maybe even just being more aware of the people you're speaking with, and how
And
they
Haley, that
respond.
was the point. Yeah,
Yep.
I couldn't agree more, because I think that's really the difference of another way to say it too is like strong communication skills, but also strong emotional intelligence, where you can kind of read the room, figure out what might fly better, that sort of thing. And I do want to be cognizant of time. I know it's 11:56 and we are deep in this conversation. It's such a good conversation to have. But one other thing I just wanted to make note of is that piece about professional branding. And I think it's important for a lot of students to know that you can be actively doing that now. You don't have to wait until you get into the workplace. If you're posting on LinkedIn about a project that you're working on, industries you're interested in, social justice movements that make you passionate. I mean, those are things that when a recruiter goes to look at your page, they're really going to make you stand out. And it doesn't have to be like what you were saying. It doesn't have to be so overthought, but it's better than having a completely empty page. It's already helped building your brand.
Exactly. Yeah. Whether that be liking or commenting or even just making more connections, just showing a presence on these virtual platforms stands up. Definitely. When I see a student that has a really developed LinkedIn page, I get excited and I call the internal recruiters. So there's our little recruiting standpoint, but awesome. Well, I will wrap it up here. So I just want to share my email with you all. If you have any questions, comments, you want to practice a mock interview with me, or find out more about how to interview with ALCU, reach out to my email here. I'd be more than happy to be a resource for you all. I know you have wonderful Emily and Leslie to help along the way. But if you ever need an outside employer, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to help. And hopefully, I hope to see some of you in the future, maybe working at ALCU.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us for this workshop. And I mean, I just can't express how important this information is to our